America's Mission by Henry A. Murray. Survey Graphic, October 1948. Issue 37, pages 411 through 415. America's Mission. The alternatives, utter destruction or peaceful fellowship, which confront us all, why only the USA can lead the world to the civilized choice. Man has been a ferocious killer of his own kind, but his unexampled ingenuity has made war so terrible, so mechanical and impersonal, so ruinous and racking, that the delight he once found in it has vanished. World War I was blighting. World War II approached the limit of average endurance. Another war may shock, strain, and splinter man beyond regeneration. The explosion at Hiroshima was warning that the killer in man, springing out of greed for profits, power, and prestige, must be subdued, or the paragons of animals and his finest work will be reduced to dust and rubble. Man's obligation to man is to abolish war, not merely to postpone it a few years while he exhausts his resources in manufacturing still more potent instruments of self-extermination. Those who believe that the atomic or the biotic bomb is just another weapon which will not radically change the character and consequences of war have not discerned that here is an instance where an increment in quantity results in a significant difference in quality. Just as in skin burns of critical magnitude, a slight increase in the area of seared surface will make the whole difference between life and death. In World War II, such targets of prolonged and savage bombing as London and Berlin could continue to serve as centers of important operations, because there, in contrast to Hiroshima, it was possible to keep the rate of essential building and repair equal to the rate of wreckage. But the hot war towards which we are now drifting, if not hurtling, is, according to experts best qualified to judge, a war of absolute weapons capable of inflicting such physical, biological, psychological, and sociological damage that the power to recover will be lost for generations or forever. Doom is more appalling than any of the apocalyptic prophecies, and those who dwell on it are liable to be called hysterical. But since it is the best judgment of the probable effects of atomic and biotic warfare, dependable as a physician's judgment of the probable effects of a malignant tumor, it would be more scientific to apply the word hysterical to those who can rid their eyes of the disquieting image, those, in short, who are capable of negative hallucinations or hysterical blindness. The man who shuts his mind to the idea that we are heading for a war of mutual extermination excludes the most urgent reason for responsible and constructive timely action, and so elects for himself, in this life or death agony of his race, the role of a detached non-entity, a soft spot in the social body, or the role of mischief-maker or inadvertent traitor. We live in an irrational and lawless world. Ideal environment for the maneuverings of a gangster nation, it is expedient, let us admit, to be prepared to talk the basic language of gangsterdom by increasing our military forces. But we had better realize that if these forces are ever activated in another nationalistic war to the finish, say against Russia, it will not be to defend the United States and its ideals, the resplendent or the ragged ones, because there is no defense against the lethal weapons of today, and our ideals will not survive a conflict so deadly and demoralizing. Nothing valuable will be saved, nothing gained, nothing proved. Fanatical communists in a dozen countries will continue as before to operate and propagate. The whole affair will be merely a prodigious clash of impersonalized and mechanized barbarians, a conflict without meaning and without glory, a spectacle to make the angels weep forever. Over against the prospect of one last sadistic orgy stands life with all its countless promises of satisfaction. It is hard to believe that an American, with any capacity for joy, with any grain of honor or of charity, any faith in man's untapped potentialities, can contemplate without abhorrence the idea of launching an atomic and biotic war, or of witnessing it as a neutral, or of being the victim of it, or of bequeathing to his children a world in which it would be, as now, an ever-present menace. Will we not be clothed in truth, surely and unassailably, if we go forth on the assumption that the United States does not choose to have its life extinguished, that as a people we are eager for existence, for peace and fellowship, and hence are overwhelmingly in favor of abolishing total wars? Let us agree, the abolition of war is the supreme goal, whether you or I, this man or that woman, will work for it or not, because failure to achieve it will cancel every private and public long-range undertakings, yours and his and hers and mine. Granting this, our first task is to conceive the means. Many have been tried, none has proved effective. The Christian religion has not succeeded. The systems of morals derived from it have not succeeded. Pacifying attempts to avoid war through disarmament, appeasement, isolationism, or irreproachable neutrality have not succeeded. Military might has succeeded only for so long as one great nation was both able and determined to police the world. Nowhere in history has any bargain among diplomats, any agreement, compact, treaty, covenant, or league proved effective in eliminating wars. Doubtless there are times, and this may be one, when talks or conferences are indicated, but those who would convince us that this procedure can do more than postpone disaster are harmful to the cause of peace insofar as they tuck up and sing to sleep the rational fears which otherwise might prompt us to seek a durable solution. The career of the League of Nations provides ample ground for predicting that the United Nations, no matter how conspicuous its successes in dealing with secondary problems, cannot possibly accomplish, as the Charter stands today, the task for which it was primarily designed, the prevention of wars. The UN does not possess the necessary mechanism for reaching imperative decisions in hotly disputed cases, and it does not possess a dependable mechanism for enforcing its decisions. Already one of its great champions, Sumner Wells, in his recent book, We Need Not Fail, has admitted that the New World Order that took shape only 3 years ago at San Francisco, in which millions had placed their faith and hopes, seems to be dissolving like mist before the sun. Man has found one and only one method of eliminating wars between social units, that of establishing a single embracing law and a government, with the power to enforce it. We have learned that a tribal law, government, and police are capable of preventing war in the tribe, that a city law, government, and police are capable of preventing war in the city, that a state law, government, and police are capable of preventing war in the state, and that a national law, government, and police are capable of preventing war in the nation. On these grounds, it is logical to suppose that a world law, government, and police would prove the most effective means of preventing war in the world, since the occasional occurrence of a civil war or a local riot shows that not even a central government is always capable of checking armed conflict within the area of its sovereignty. There is little likelihood that anything less than this could be efficient. Reasoning from facts of history and experience, thousands of men and women have reached the conclusion that the longed-for new force capable of eliminating war is world federation. They disagree on one question only: should we strive for world government now? People who say no have various arguments, for example, that world government cannot be made to work. But we have learned from stern experience that, in preventing war, government is the only institution which ever has worked, though, to be sure, on a smaller scale, the practical men who are advocating one or another conventional substitute for world government have nothing on which to found their hopes, except centuries of failure. Perhaps Disraeli was right when he characterized practical men as those who repeat the errors of their forefathers. Surely, if today we go along as usual, we shall go along as usual into war, this time into a war to end all living happiness. It seems that the only practical course, as defined by practical men, is suicide. Some would discredit world government by asserting that it is idealistic. This is true in the sense that it is an ideal which has not yet been put into effect, just as the United States Constitution was idealistic in 1787. But it is not idealistic in the sense that it is based on an unduly high estimate of the goodness of men. The idealists of 1948 are those who believe that nations will become wise, just and charitable enough to settle all their differences peacefully without a universal law and government to compel them. It is widely believed that we can not join a world federation without relinquishing a good deal of our cherished freedom. But actually, as Emery Reeves has pointed out in his widely read book, The Anatomy of Peace, the reverse is closer to the truth. We shall gain more freedom than we possibly can lose. At present, we do not possess the most desired form of freedom, freedom from war. Only by sharing sovereignty in a world government shall we acquire freedom from the frequent necessity of sacrificing inordinate amounts of time, money, material good, material energy, not to speak of limbs and lives, in preparing for a war, then in fighting it, and afterwards in recovering from it. The amount of freedom that is sacrificed in the enterprise may be appreciated by considering one item. 79% of our national budget will be spent on the after effects of the last war and on preparation for the next. The simple fact is that no national government has ever been capable, or ever will be capable, of giving its citizens freedom from wars with rival countries. Yet this most precious freedom is within our reach. It can be won by delegating to a world institution enough sovereignty to settle disagreements among nations in an orderly and peaceful manner. In delegating authority to the city police force, most of us do not lose freedom but achieve it. That is, we gain the privilege of pursuing our different paths without having to devote time and energy to the defense of our lives and possessions. Only outlaws and professional gangsters lose freedom by the operations of law, government, and the police. In refusing to submit to the decisions of a supreme law-enforcing agency, the United States and Russia proclaim themselves world outlaws. They resist the establishment of international law and order, one would say, because they are strong and therefore believe that they can obtain more of what they want by might of money or might of arms than they can by right. For the United States, however, an outlaw's freedom is, in the long run, nothing but a boomerang. It clears the way for all kinds of inconsistent, irresponsible, and arbitrary actions, which cause other nations, potential friends and allies, to regard us with suspicion and resentment, and which ultimately can lead to nothing but annihilation. Sometimes one meets a man who says that he is opposed to world government because it might lead, say, the vote of 7 nations to our engagement in more wars. But the record shows that we became engaged in 2 world wars by the vote of only 1 nation, and it is now clear that if we had become engaged sooner, the aggressors could have been stopped much more quickly, and at far less cost. And today, without a world government, are we not riding perilously close to still another war, which for us Americans may be the last ride together? The conviction that Russia will oppose world federation should not deter us. Although the Russians may have less to lose from an exterminating war than we have, they probably have more to gain from peace and membership in a world community. The question not discussed here is slow to bring this truth home to them. The refusal on the part of the Soviet Union to share sovereignty with the other nations of the world would be regrettable, but it would not defeat the cause of federalism. In fact, such a decision might temporarily advance it, since in the absence of the Russian delegates, the difficult business of constructing a constitution could proceed with less distrust and friction, and be concluded with more dispatch and unanimity. Nations which choose at the start to stay outside would be invited to join later. If Russia proves adamant, it will mean that she is determined to carry out her present plan to convert by infiltration one country after the other, if possible without committing any action that would justify the declaration of a shooting war, and thus to build step by step a world order of her own, ruled dictatorially from Moscow. What can check the advance of this endeavor except an equally competent and sustained endeavor to organize a more mature, just, and humane form of world order? It is not likely that many of the smaller nations can for long resist independently the relentless terror tactics of Russian-trained communists in their midst. They must go to one side or the other. Food may lure them to our side for a hungry season, but their affections cannot be won and bound with dollars. Nor can we make a strong impression by preaching the virtues of democracy to peoples who are not inclined by temper or fitted by training to make democracy work, at least in a chaotic environment with the storm cloud of Russian communism looming over their horizon. Nations must be offered the assurance of mutual friendship and security within a dependable world order. This world order cannot be another totalitarian dictatorship with Washington as its capital. It must be a democratic world order with a superordinate government in which all nations are properly represented. This constitutional form of union should be more acceptable than Russia's system of tyranny to most of the nations which lie outside the Soviet sphere of sovereignty. The longer its establishment is delayed, however, the fewer will be the countries free to join it. At the moment, the most compelling argument against our government's advocacy of world federation is that this will lead to the withdrawal of Russia and her satellites from the United Nations, the partition of the world into two irreconcilable parts, and sooner rather than later total war. This, I believe, is the view of many of our most experienced and competent old-school statesmen, diplomats, political scientists, and historians. Most of these seem to be living intellectually in the 19th century. So convinced are they that sovereign powers can be balanced amicably by verbal strategies and compromises, and so resistant are they to the idea that the world's present sickness calls for a fundamental change, to quote the late Elihu Root, in the principle to be applied to international breaches of the peace. The goal, remember, is to abolish war, not postpone it. A preliminary step. It should be possible to set up a partial world federation within the United Nations without disrupting its regular functions. Under these circumstances, Russia, after a hullabaloo of threats, may decide to retain her place in the United Nations, since by pulling away she would deprive herself of the providential opportunity she has enjoyed up to now to frustrate the efforts of the other powers to arrive at equitable settlements. In the second place, the departure of the USSR from the United Nations would not broaden the wide gulf which already exists between her and other nations. Her representatives have been present physically and formally at meetings of the UN, but they have remained resolutely set against actual participation. They have never conformed either in their aims or in their methods with the design of the Charter. They have merely given the world another exhibition of the rigor of their political education, of how to use a democratic assembly as an arena for verbal warfare, in order to engender discord. To be realistic, we have never been in contact with them from the beginning of the UN. The world has been divided into two incompatible parts, and 3 years of talk have only served to define and intensify the differences. If Russia is unrelentingly opposed to world federation, it indicates that she does not want to abolish war, but to wage it when her time for it has come. She has shown no tendency as yet to abandon Lenin's assumption that war with the non-communist nations is inevitable. It is hardly reasonable to suppose, however, that Russia will start a shooting war before she is prepared for it, before she has finished integrating her satellites, decentralizing her industries, building her fleets of airplanes and submarines, and above all, until she has manufactured a supply of atomic bombs. In other words, it is not likely that Russia's own time schedule will be much affected by whether she stays with UN or not. Thus, if we fail, through lack of sagacity or courage, to form a partial world government in time to checkmate her at her own game, we shall lose our sole chance to create the one institution which could eventually eliminate war, or could, if war is thrust upon us, unify all the rest of the world in subduing the aggressor. I submit that if the Russian people were frankly and fully informed of the actual situation, they would be inclined to join a world community. If not, it is likely that even a partial world federation would constitute so formidable an obstacle to armed aggression that no nation would attempt it. Finally, if any nation were so madly criminal as to precipitate a war, a world government already established would stand as the only moral value worth fighting and dying for. This would be the war that really would make the world safe for democracy, the war that really would end war. It would cease as soon as the aggressor agreed to become a permanent member of the Federation. Overcautious diplomatic maneuvers, half measures, partial remedies, appeasements and anodynes, sedatives and palliatives can only serve to avoid the showdown until Russia has a large stockpile of atomic bombs and we, more or less alone, are forced to fight a much more horrific nationalistic war without hope of any sane outcome. One thing we must all concede: the advance to world government will be impeded by countless obstacles and pitfalls, foreseeable and unforeseeable. It is perhaps the most difficult enterprise that fate has ever required of mankind. But what of that? Is the genius of the human race played out? If our physical and biological scientists have proved capable of inventing the perfect means of exterminating societies, our political scientists, jurists, and statesmen should prove capable of inventing the perfect means of conserving them. We Americans have always acted on the assumption that the impossible is our appointed providence, and in this instance we are spurred by the certainty that the impossible is the only possible way out of humanity's present strait. Interest in world government is gaining momentum through the world. In the United States, several groups dedicated to this goal combined in February 1947 to form one organization, the United World Federalists, which, under the intelligent and energetic leadership of Cord Meyer, Jr., is now the main channel for the efforts of every American who is prompted to do what he can to save us all from pandemic savagery and death. The immediate purpose of the organization is to persuade the President and Congress to initiate and support two measures. First, the revision of the UN Charter through a General Conference of the United Nations under Article 109, and second, an amendment to our own Constitution which will permit full participation in a world government. Suppose that many an American, like myself, has been rationalizing his disinclination to intervene in politics by telling himself that the President and Congress can be depended on. Three major agencies in this country are seeking to implement the idea of world government. Largest and most widely known is United World Government Incorporated, which represents the amalgamation of 5 national and state organizations. These met at Asheville, North Carolina last year, and on February 22nd voted to form the present national body. It is this organization which Dr. Murray here recognizes as the main channel for the efforts of every American who is prompted to do what he can to save us all from pandemic savagery and death. United World Federalists has primarily an educational program. It advocates no specific plan, but seeks to spread information on world government and to win adherents to that cause. It now has 23 state branches and 587 chapters in 41 states. The national office is at 7 East 12th Street, New York. To formulate a concrete plan for world government was the task undertaken by a group of scholars at the University of Chicago, who immediately after Hiroshima organized a committee to frame a world constitution. Robert M. Hutchins, Chancellor of the University of Chicago, is chairman, and Professor G.C. Borges, secretary. The committee publishes a magazine, Common Cause, which each month carries analysis and discussion of world government problems and possibilities. It recently issued in book form a preliminary draft of a world constitution, University of Chicago Press, No. 2. A member of the committee to frame a world constitution, Stringfellow Barr, former president of St. John's College, is head of a second educational agency in the field, the establishment of which was announced last month. The stated purpose of this foundation for world government is the same as that of United World Federalists Incorporated, to promote a public educational campaign in the principles of world government. The foundation was made possible by a gift of $1 million from Mrs. Anita McCormick Blaine of Chicago, daughter of Cyrus McCormick, the inventor of the Reaper. It has temporary offices at 625 Madison Avenue, New York. Do what is required. It is well known that Dr. Harold C. Urey and other atomic scientists spent months informing congressmen of the vital facts of the nation's peril. Furthermore, the framing of a world constitution calls for unusual legal skills. What can an ordinary citizen contribute to an architectural undertaking of such dimensions? Let Congress do it. But before deciding to rest complacently in this trust, let us recall the performance of the Congress after World War I, when it betrayed the men of goodwill who had fought to end all war, by repudiating the League and shunning all international obligations. Today it seems that Congress is again 20 years and one war behind the need and opportunities of the situation, although many resolutions favoring world government have been pending before the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Foreign Relations Committee, and a few have been discussed at hearings. None has reached the floor of Congress. Thus, during the 3 years since Hiroshima, all hopes of saving this and other countries from extinction have been blocked in Washington. The only way to win World War III is to prevent it. That is to say, we must mobilize all our forces to create something rather than to destroy. And for this task we need, at the top level, a few constructive statesmen of the caliber of Franklin, Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, Mason, Morris, James Wilson, and at least one man whose charity is as inexhaustible as Lincoln's. Iniquity is rampant, the tribulation to good men profound, the way dark. Should no enlightened leadership be vouchsafed us, then, as the Navasot philosopher of the Texas Spectator declares, this is going to be one of them periods in history when the United States demonstrates its greatness, when the people rise to the occasion and get along without a leader. Another philosopher, Ralph Barton Perry of Harvard, author of One World in the Making, warns us, the present world's disorder is everybody's responsibility, and to transform it into beneficent order is everybody's duty and everybody's hope. Hence we, the people, since it is up to us, must urge our political representatives to come out for a world federation that has sufficient power to ensure the reign of justice in place of the willfulness of force. For a war-detesting man or woman to expect peace, or to wish for peace, but not to work for peace, that I would call indecent. At this moment, the conduct of each of us, especially of each congressman, is of vital concern to all, because the survival of our society hangs by a thread, and one member's action or inaction might make the minute difference that will save or wreck the whole. To take the initiative in the creation of a democratic world government, this is our mission, our manifest destiny, because it is in our power to achieve this thing and in no other nation's power, and mankind expects it from us. 160 years ago, our ancestors successfully performed a comparable experiment. They conceived a federal government and made it work, and all breeds of men and women who have since migrated to this land and learned to live here side by side in peace and confidence have found it good. The United States is the abstract of the one world which now awaits creation. It seems fitting then that leadership in executing this last and most difficult experiment should have fallen to our lot. Perhaps fate has summoned us at a time when we are not capable of acquitting ourselves with honor. On all sides one sees the classical symptoms of moral breakdown, manifestations, to quote Lewis Mumford, of the cult which denies the fundamental discriminations between good and bad, between higher and lower, which are the very basis of human development. But despite these discouraging evidences, I hold that there is still some unspoiled latent stuff in us, which, quickened by this emergency, can carry us beyond our common selves, to become once more the pioneers of the world. As Melville described us, the advance guard sent on through the wilderness of untried things to break a new path. By committing ourselves at once to world government, we shall be keeping faith with the Americans who fought and died in 2 world wars, and heartening all peoples of the earth with the only prospect of security that can counteract the lures of every form of totalitarianism. For us at home, world government is an object excellent enough to kindle the enthusiasm of all but the most cynical. It is the summum bonum for a bewildered and despairing world. Philadelphia, 787. Saturday, December 1st. L.J. Octor Rush, on the subject of the new government tending to abridge the states of their respective sovereignty, observed in the convention that this passion for separate sovereignty had destroyed the Grecian Union, This plurality of sovereignty is in politics what plurality of gods is in religion. It is the idolatry, the heathenism of government. The doctor concluded an animated speech by holding out the new Constitution as pregnant with an increase of freedom, knowledge, and religion. Page 299, Pennsylvania and the Federal Constitution, edited by John Bach McMaster and Frederick Stone. The record of the ratification of the United States Constitution by Pennsylvania, October 1948, page 415. End of America's Mission by Henry A. Murray. Survey Graphic, edition 37.